Hello, horror fans. Welcome back to Jay versus Horror. Struggling to get on today. I don't know what's going on. I think I had some like internet outages in my area or something. But yeah, we're going to talk about some of today's top horror news stories, and we're also going to talk about some of the questions and comments that we got in the group. If you're not a member of the Jay versus Horror group on Facebook, go check it out. We got 26,000 horror fans there, and there's plenty of conversation. Everybody talks. If you post in that group, you're definitely going to get a big reaction. So let's talk about some of the top horror stories of today that I saw so far. And one that I wanted to mention right off the bat was a story here about Silence of the Lambs, the Horror Queers podcast that's attached to Bloody Disgusting. They have put out an episode. I won't say they're trashing Silence of the Lambs, but it's not good in my opinion. And they have once again managed to connect Silence of the Lambs to transphobia, even though I don't think you could have a more clear film that states a character is not a transsexual or whatever, a transvestite, transsexual. I don't know what they. You can't classify Bill as anything because I can't even tell you what he's not to some extent because I think Lecter explains it better than anybody can in the movie, and that's just that Bill is he's trying to identify with something. He's not transsexual. He's a psychopath, and he doesn't have an identity, and he's trying desperately to identify with something to give him an identity, right? So he doesn't feel like such a freak. And so yeah, I hate it when this comes up. It comes up quite a bit. It's come up more and more over the last couple of years, and I truly hate it. I'm telling you guys, Norman Bates, Angela from Sleepaway Camp, Buffalo Bill, those are not transgender characters. They are not transgender. They are people who have a psychological problem and created a multiple personality that just happened to be female. In Norman's case, he creates his mother as an alternate personality because he doesn't know how to get by on his own. Because of the way she's mistreated him for years, he can't live without that, without being mistreated like that now. So he had to create her to drive himself. And in Buffalo Bill's situation, that's like Lecter said. Bill doesn't know what he is. He just feels like he's not normal, so he's trying to identify with cultures that are outside of the norm at that period. And so, uh, yeah, I don't buy it, and I hate the fact that it's taken out of context. And so then the guy who did the episode, they're on Bloody Disgusting commenting about the episode, and people are tearing him down in the comments. They're saying, look, it specifically states in the novel and in the movie that Buffalo Bill is not a transgender character. Stop attacking this film. It's just not true. It's You are taking this out of context. And look, I personally, I don't usually do this, but I'll state my thoughts on it. I'm 100% for trans people's rights, transgender rights. I don't. I think they should be allowed to have any job they want. I think they should be allowed to get married. They should be allowed to adopt. I don't care what bathroom they use. I always tell people the bathroom at my house has been transgender for the last 40 years, and it's not been a problem for us. I know that so yes, I'm a staunch supporter of gay and of all human beings having equal rights. That's what I'm a staunch supporter of. Okay, but this is bullshit, and it's not true at all. They are taking something out of context, and what I try to explain to them is, you are the one that's messing up because you are putting trans and gay people in this conversation when they shouldn't be, because you're taking it out of context and you're misrepresenting the information that's given. Okay, it's funny to me, like they never bring up James McAvoy in Split because there's so many different personalities there that it's obvious it's a personality situation. It's not a transgender situation. It's the same thing with Norman Bates and Angela. And you think Angela identified as anything? No, Angela was raised by a manipulative psychopath who told her how to act. So it wasn't a choice. It's not something that and here when we talk about transgender politics, we have to realize this is something that we always talk about. Is It's a choice. You make that. It's got to be something that's yours. It can't be something that like somebody made you that way, right? It has to be you, who you are, who you want to be. So Angela, Norman, Bill, they never really developed that. They never really developed that attempt to find out who they are, to identify as something. You don't want to call it a choice. I understand that because it's not really a choice, it's how you're born. But the way that you identify, they never got that opportunity. So yeah, it's so aggravating to me. And like I've had this discussion so many times in the last few months, and it's just people don't get it. And you know what? The person who did the episode said, well, look, we discussed that a little bit in there. They're trying to tone people down or tame people down because a lot of people are upset. They're like, look, we had that discussion about how Bill's not truly, how Lecter states that. Well, Lecter is, who's better to tell you what that character is than another character in the book, right? Like, but anyway, they tried to scapegoat like that, and I said, hey, that's not fair either because you put up a headline that says the problems with Silence of the Lambs being transphobic and stuff like that. When you put up a headline like that, you instantly are maligning the movie because 10 times more people are going to see that clickbait headline uh than actually go watch your episode and hear what you have to say. They're going to see your clickbait headline, which is why you put it out there. You attack the film openly, and then you try to back off of that by saying, well, we talked about this and that. No, it doesn't work like that. You're a hack. That's hack shit. And that's why fans are starting to divert away from websites like Bloody Disgusting because they know that they are pay for play websites. If you pay, your movie's going to get talked about well. If you don't, your movie's going to get talked about well. And then they like to do these little clickbait things where they go either praise old films that we've all been talking about for 15 years and act like they're the people to ever praise it, or they go rip down a classic film like The Exorcist, or I've seen them take apart Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Joker. They really like to try to get social about things because that's what people want from their horror websites and social commentary. So some other stuff that I saw today that I thought was interesting. There's a new film coming to Netflix, a new vampire film called Day Shift, and it actually has Snoop Dogg and Jamie Foxx in it, and it has quite a big cast. Actually, there was some other people in it that I thought was in a lot of people. Inside in it. It's going to add some comedy to the subgenre. Got some live comments here. Phil's creepy videos. Phil says, hey there, horror fans. It's your buddy Phil here. And then he says, if you could have an hour lunch with any horror actor, director, living or dead, who would it be and why? Okay. The simple answer for me is Stanley Kubrick. I love Stanley Kubrick movies, and it would just be an hour and it would be rushed for me because there's so much I would want to ask him about his choices, the choices he made in different films and what attracted him to projects, because a lot of his projects are so very different, like what attracted him to different projects. Other than that, Andrzej Zawalski, the guy who directed Possession from 1981, I would love to talk to him about his ideas on that film and what he was actually trying to convey. I've seen interviews with him before, but I'd like to ask him myself. You know what I mean? And other than that, is there anybody else? I mean, yeah, I'd love to talk to everybody. I'd take an hour with anybody. I'll talk anybody. I'll talk to anybody about horror any day of the week. But if I had to choose just one, it would be Kubrick. Just because I like the choices that he made in films, and I would want to know, I'm always interested in the thought process that goes into like a creative genius, right? And so, yeah, if that is something that you could possibly tap into, that would be something I would like to ask him about. And like I said, Zawalski, the guy who did, oh yeah, Lucio Fulci, man, I would like to ask Fulci some questions, just about the choices he made with gore. Like the stuff that he shot was so terrible sometimes, but it was great because that's what they had, and he shot it, and he was able to stay on it in a way that made it great. Like the cheesy gore became something that you really loved. And I mean, at the time, it probably wasn't cheesy. I guess early '80s and stuff, people really like to Beyond the scenes in the beginning where the guy's getting beat to death with the chains. The scene where the acid falls on the woman's face and the camera stays there and you watch her face get eaten off. I think that's that. Yeah, I'd love to talk to Fulci. Uh, I gravitate to people who are dead because I feel like there's still an opportunity for me to talk to people who are alive. Uh, I missed Argento a couple years ago at a convention. I'll never forgive myself for it because of all the big names that I have met and seen and talked to and been in the same room with, Dario Argento's not one of them. And it's not often that he comes to America for a convention, and I missed that one. And it was a work thing. I had to work, couldn't help it. It's the pain of being a horror fan, right? You got to pay for all that stuff somehow. So yeah, wasn't able to catch him, and it was some other interesting stories. We talked about Jamie Foxx and Snoop doing a new vampire hunter movie. Kind of sounds like Blade with Mad Max Fury Road is getting a prequel. Now they've been talking about this for years, right? Uh, Initially, nothing ever happens fast with George Miller for some reason. Like, it took like what 5 years to make Mad Max Fury Road, but a lot of what people didn't understand about that was they spent years out there in the desert building those sets. They spent like 2 years building those sets. So yeah, a couple years pre-production, and then it took probably a couple years to film that movie. So what we're talking about here is George Miller is doing, and it says it's on now, it's happening, it's filming at the beginning of next year, Furiosa, and it's going to be a prequel to Fury Road. And this is interesting because it's not going to have Charlize Theron in it. Well, of course, they're going the prequel road, so they don't have to use Charlize Theron, right? They can use a younger actress. And it says here that they're using Anna Taylor-Joy. She has a show on Netflix about chess. I haven't checked it out yet. I think it's called The Queen's Gambit or something like that. I haven't checked it out yet, but I've heard good things about it. And she was great in The Witch. If you guys remember The Witch, she was awesome in that movie, right? So she is going to be playing Furiosa. And that is a tough role to take it on as a prequel. I mean, is it just me, or did Furiosa steal the show in Mad Max, right? Like Tom Hardy didn't even really feel like he was Mad Max. He was just kind of like a protest guy that they were calling Max. It didn't seem like the same Max, the coolest. And so I really thought she stole the show in Mad Max Fury Road. And I wanted this movie to happen, but I didn't have any idea that they were thinking prequel and that they were going to go with different actress. That seen Hannibal Rising. It's a good movie, but like it's hard to live up to something that everybody else has tried, and like Anthony Hopkins won an Oscar for, and you're trying to play a younger version of that. It's like it's something that hasn't evolved into this point yet. And if you look at like Hayden Christensen in the Star Wars movies, that's an example of how it doesn't work, right? Uh, George Charleston says hi, and he says Tom Hardy played a good Venom. I agree on that. Yeah, I love Tom Hardy, man. I'm a big Tom Hardy fan, and I'm not as much of a fan as like of Hollywood Tom Hardy as I am of like English Tom Hardy. I love the stuff that I saw him do before he started doing stuff like Mad Max and Venom. Bronson is a great film from 2009. If you guys have never seen that, go check it out. Tom Hardy plays the most notorious criminal in England's history. He initially goes in for like a 2-year stint in prison and becomes an ultimate badass while he's in prison. And through beating other inmates to death and beating guards to death and just being a general fucking problem, he ends up spending like 40 years in prison or some shit like that. I can't remember exactly, but and they call him Bronson because he earns this reputation as the tough guy. So they're referring to Charlie Bronson when they call him that, and yeah, Tom Hardy was in that, stole the show, should have got an Oscar nomination for that movie. He's been in some great stuff. And George says, I heard Tom Hardy may take over Wolverine. Yeah, I've heard some different stuff about that. I've heard the Tom Hardy thing. I've also heard that they're going to go younger, that they're looking to go younger with Wolverine this time. And a lot of people are saying Zac Efron. A lot of people have said the guy that played Elton John, I can't remember, Taron Egerton, or was in the Kingsman or whatever. Yeah, they've talked about several different people. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that, right? I mean, Fantastic Four looks like it's going to be at first, and they're going to kind of try to establish some kind of link between Fantastic Four and the new launch they take with the X-Men. And so I'm interested to see Fantastic Four first, and I hope to God they cast John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic and Emily Blunt as Susan Storm. I hope that's the way that goes, because that's just, I mean, I don't see anybody else. To me, he's perfect for it. Once in a lifetime casting. And but yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with that. I'm interested to see the next Venom too, because we got Woody Harrelson playing the villain in that. He's playing Carnage, and Carnage is a sick bastard. He's kind of a horror movie villain, right? psychopathic serial killer. And yeah, so that's interesting though. That's an interesting story. And so the next story I see here is talking about Rob Zombie's Monsters. That's right, Rob Zombie's making or remaking or re-envisioning or rebooting, whatever you want to call it, the Monsters. And it's looking like this is something that could go straight to Peacock. So if you have Peacock, Peacock has made some efforts in the last couple months to get people to subscribe to Peacock, and they took on the WWE stuff. Now, if you have Peacock, you have WWE Network. They've you know put The Office on. They've got a lot of great shows from the '90s and stuff like that. But this would be a big move for them to start producing original content and producing. They tried this before. I don't guess people remember. Maybe about 10 years ago, they tried to do a series called Mockingbird Lane, and like where Jerry O'Connell was playing. You know, oh shoot, I can't remember. Anyway, Herman Munster. Yeah, he was playing Herman Munster. I wanted to say Frankenstein because that's the character that comes to my mind when I think about Herman Munster. But yeah, it was a pretty terrible attempt at rebooting it then. So they've held on to the property, and I guess they're going to try it again. And what's going on here? I mean, we got to talk about this with Rob Zombie, okay? Because how does this work? I mean, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work because if Rob Zombie remakes the Monsters and he makes a film that you want to watch with your kids, nobody wants to see that from Rob Zombie. Nobody wants to see a family friendly Monsters movie from Rob Zombie. At the same time, if you look at the source material, the Monsters, nobody wants to see the Monsters running around raping people, cutting people's faces off, and wearing them and things like that. So I don't know how did we get, I mean, Eli Roth doesn't make much sense, but he makes more sense than Rob Zombie. I mean, it's like they went to the polar opposite. And so there's no way for this to succeed because if it is family friendly and it's just all comedy and lighthearted and stuff, Rob Zombie fans are going to hate it. A lot of horror fans are going to hate it because Rob Zombie directed it. And they're going to be like, what the fuck is this? But at the same time, if Rob Zombie remakes this into something that's crazy and absurd and, stuck in 10th gear, then people are going to rip it apart too. They're going to be like, that's not the Monsters. Why would you let Rob Zombie near this? Oh, it's sacred. And people who have never watched the show are going to be all of a sudden, fans of it since the day they were born. And, so that's the way that goes. But I don't see this working out for Rob. It's a no-win situation for him. I still believe he should if he wants to do remakes, he should do Maximum Overdrive. It's something that's made for him. The dialogue is already similar to the dialogue that he writes all the time, and the characters, and yeah, he could take his cast of actors that he usually has and put them right into that diner, no problem. So some of the other stories I saw, just one of them was about the why You're Next is the quintessential horror film for millennials. Why do we have to brand stuff, right? It's an editorial, of course. Why do we have to brand stuff? It's just a great horror movie. Do you really believe that you have to be millennial to love Your Next? It takes the entire genre or subgenre of home invasion and flips it on its head. It's fucking innovative. It's not just for millennials. It's for anybody that likes horror movies. Also, the performance from Sharni Vincent in that movie, where, I mean, look, if you're looking for a feminist horror film, if you're looking for something that speaks women empowerment, You're Next. Sharni Vincent is a total badass. I think they should make a sequel to Your Next called Your Last and finish it up where she goes after somebody else. Just great stuff. I love Your Next. Now we're gonna head over to the group. 26,000 members there. Lots of fans of the channel. And so the question that I put out there was kind of a little frisky. I said, I'm coming over to your place tonight to watch one horror movie and have a blast talking about it. Which horror film are you picking for us to watch together? And 115 people commented. We reached over 2,600 people and got a lot of fun comments. Let's take a look at some. We're not going to do all 115 because you guys don't want to listen to me talk for that long. But we'll start here. Kaz Bardell says Friday the 13th, part 6, because it's my favorite. Hey, that's one of my favorites too, Kaz. Brad Golden says The Blob, 88. No argument there, buddy. I love that movie. I like I was talking to Regina about this the other day about Kevin Dillon, about how, Entourage was kind of like a somewhat of a parody of his own life to an extent. And we were talking about The Blob, but uh Jayakar and Adam both say, dude, it's got to be The Thing. I could talk all night about it. Of course, a lot of people said The Thing. Yeah, that's a great one to talk about. I love to talk about it, especially the ending, because I have my own little theories about the end of The Thing. So, yeah, we could definitely talk about that. And moving on, Jordan Powell says Halloween 3. Yeah, I would look, I'm down to watch anything. I'll watch Halloween 3. It's not my favorite of the Halloween movies, but I'm not the type of person to complain about it. I'm one of those people who always says, look, I don't think Halloween 3, there's usually two camps. There's the people that say Halloween 3 sucks, doesn't have Michael Myers in it. Then there's the other camp that says, you guys are stupid. Halloween 3 is the best one in the franchise, or it's a great movie on its own and all that. But for me, I feel like it's kind of in between. It's not really a bad film, but it's not really the greatest either. I think it's pretty good from that era, and at least I like the story being somewhat original. It's not like all the other stories that were made at that time. Steve Rogers, Captain America himself, says Phantasm. Duh. Sorry, Steve. Sorry for asking, man. Julius Jeter says Trick or Treat. Love the connected stories and love how each throws you for a loop. Yeah, I gotta say I love Trick or Treat. It's become one of those films that every year at Halloween you gotta watch Trick or Treat. It's one of the 31 days of Halloween at my house. It's gonna get played at least once, probably a couple times because Regina loves it a lot too. DeAndre Bush says Candyman, one of my favorites, buddy. Tony Todd's one of my favorite actors in horror. Period. One of my favorite people to talk to. One of the most charismatic guys I've ever met, besides myself. Besides myself, of course. And is it? That's funny. Like I would mess that up while I'm saying that. Uh, yeah. So great pick, Candyman. Let's see, Harry Brecken says Exorcist 3, great film. Just introduced Regina to that a while back because she's not a big fan of The Exorcist. Took me a good while to get her to watch part 3, and she loves part 3 now. It's one of her favorites now because it's nothing like the original. She doesn't like the graphic violence with the little girl in the original, and I get that. It's not for everybody. Andrew Mantello says The Haunting, the original black and white, such a classic horror film, and Steve agreed with him on that one being a good choice. Yeah, it's a great film, man. I kind of like the remake a little bit too. It's terrible though, as far as like it didn't hold up well, right? Like the cast is great, but like the CGI from that era is really bad. And it's like where it's just starting. And Jan de Bont did that movie, the remake, and he had just come off doing Twister, which the CGI that he did in that film, the way he did it, it worked really well. But then when he did, you know, uh, The Haunting, I didn't feel like it worked very well or as well, and it doesn't hold up well. That's for sure. And Joe Allen says Fright Night. I'm assuming he's talking about the original. Yeah, we could watch Fright Night, man. Ryan Sanders says Motel Hell. Why not? John Tomlinson says From Beyond. Yes, that's a great film. Barbara Crampton and uh, uh, I can't believe Jeffrey Combs. Yeah. Oh, my mind. Where's my mind today? Should have took my ginkgo biloba this morning. Yeah, but Jeffrey Combs, and they're kind of like in different roles than they were from Reanimator, where she's kind of almost in the lead here a little bit. Jim Otto says Return of the Living Dead. Yes, I just watched Return of the Living Dead about 4 or 5 days ago. Went back and revisited the original again. Kevin Patterson says Reanimator. I love Reanimator. Reanimator for me is like The Exorcist. It's something I watch 2 or 3 times a year. Tony Kanopka says Possession 1981, but you're going to have to bring your copy since I don't own it. Laugh out loud. I'm sure there are plenty of things that I may have missed in the film that you could point out too. He knows Tony's messing with me on this one. He knows I'm obsessed with that movie, that particular movie. Like it's so much fun to watch and like try to break down what's going on and different things. And uh, I'm not obsessed with it, but it's one I like to watch probably 4 times a year or something. Great film. Sam Neill, Isabel Ed Johnny. Uh, if you've never seen Possession 1981, it's one of my favorite films of all time. So definitely check it out. I think you got to stick with it though. It's really slow. Like the first half of it's really slow, and then it like boom. In the second half, it becomes this Hellraiser esque horror film that's great. I just love it. And I talked about it earlier. I talked about wanting to, if I had to somebody I could talk to for an hour in horror, Andrzej Zawalski. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Directed this film, and so yeah, uh, Tony, I owe you a Blu-ray, man, and I was gonna send it Monday, but Regina broke her foot, and we have been kind of in a limbo state where she hasn't been able to do anything for 4 days, and I've been or for a week now actually, and I've been trying to pick up the slack, so I haven't done it. But what I decided to do, man, was it's gonna be I'm gonna mail it Thursday, and I'm mailing you two, man. I'm gonna pick two out of my collection to send you because I've been so I like I'm 3 weeks late on this. I know. But yeah, it's just been one thing after the next as far as me being able to. My post office is all the way across town, and it's a whole thing. But yeah, I apologize, Tony. And let's move on. Eric Hansen says Hell Night. That's a great film. William Kusamati says The Shining and Doctor Sleep. Yeah, man, I would love to do that. That sounds like a great, fun time, right? Like a double feature, The Shining and then Doctor Sleep. I love this, man. I love that The Shining and Doctor Sleep are connected through novel and then they're connected through movie, right? If you read the book, okay, the Overlook doesn't burn down at the end, right? So the Overlook Hotel, I mean, if you not the books, I got it totally backwards. In the book, the Overlook does burn down at the end, right? It's in the book, the Overlook Hotel burns down at the end of The Shining. So when you read Doctor Sleep, when you get to the end of Doctor Sleep, the Overlook Hotel is not there anymore. It's a different setup totally. I love that book, but it's totally different. In the movie, they connected the movie to the movie and let King connect the book to the book, right? So when they go back in the movie, the Overlook is still there, and I loved it. I didn't know what I was going to think about it because I love the book so much, but I actually prefer the ending to the movie over the book. I love going back to the Overlook and seeing Jack again and going through all that. I thought that was perfect, man. Lasse Frey Bojornsson says The Beyond from Lucio Fulci, of course, man. We could talk about The Beyond all night. It's another one of my favorites, like Possession from '81, to talk about so much symbolism and stuff in there. And you know, Fulci is real big on gore, but he's also real big on leaving things open, like making things ambiguous. This is a famously ambiguous ending to The Beyond. Also, City of the Living Dead has a very famously ambiguous ending where people are like, what does that mean? You know, and it's kind of up for your own interpretation. Pat Weaver says The Shining and Hellraiser. You got me. I'll be there. We can do that. Zachary Love All says The Thing. Leah McLaughlin, one of our moderators at J versus Horror, says Color Out of Space. Yeah, that movie really surprised me too. I was surprised how good it was. And like Nicolas Cage gave a good performance. It was like a little unleashed, but at the same time, he held it back and played the dad when he needed to do that. I thought that was pretty awesome. Kathy McDonald says The Conjuring. Joel Cordiero says Return of the Living Dead. Paul Contreras says Nightmare on Elm Street. Manny McCray says Legend of Hell House. And yeah, Paul, we could definitely watch Nightmare on Elm Street, man. I love Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. I think it is vastly underrated for its originality. I know a lot of people love Nightmare on Elm Street, so I'm not saying it's completely underrated. I'm just saying, in terms of its originality, I don't think people realize how original it was for that era. Sean Thomas says Pieces. Great film. Max Hinkle says Extro. You know what, Max? I like Extro. I revisited Extro a while back. But you know, I like Extro too. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's actually like three of these. But by the time they get to three, or it's just like straight to video terrible. This I think Extro 2 was straight to video too, but they actually made an attempt. Uh, and it was kind of like an Alien ripoff. They totally abandoned the storyline from the first Extro and turned it into an Alien ripoff with Jan Michael Vincent in it, which was awesome. Brian Carlson, man, that's my old buddy, man. Brian got married and quit talking to me and quit hanging out and doing the shows. Best with you, Brian. He says a Serbian film, not even being an edgelord. Just think, what's up, Benny? He's like, not even being an edgelord. Just think that's a fun one to talk about, right for discussion. Yeah, we could talk about a Serbian film. You know, I don't think I really want to watch a Serbian film again. I've seen it like 1.5 times, or like, oh, say, okay, I watched it once, and then the second time somebody else wanted to watch it, and I still had the original copy that I had, so I put it in. Once it started, I was like, played for like maybe 10 or 15 minutes or something. I was like, I don't want to watch this with anybody else. I don't want to watch it by myself anymore. Uh, Not that I do have an appreciation for a Serbian film. I think it's very interesting plot wise. And I know there's much more discussion there to be had about, the graphic violence and rape and stuff like that in it. But, uh, beyond that, I thought it was a pretty decent horror film with a pretty decent plot that I was surprised hadn't been taken on before, but, or to that level, I guess. But yeah, so there's lots of stuff to talk about with a Serbian film. Melissa St. Andre says, I Saw the Devil. Yeah, we can watch I Saw the Devil and talk about it. I kind of always picture I Saw the Devil as in an extreme version of Batman versus the Joker, right? Because you have one character who is truly a protagonist and you have one character who is truly an antagonist. He is a bad guy. He is a serial killer, sometimes cannibal, rapist, whatever you want to call him. And he is willing to push the hero to his limits. Uh, and he's just as even though he doesn't have the same skill set as the hero, he is just as intimidating. He is just as stuff. His ferocity, his viciousness, makes him formidable. Marty Fleming says Alien, but I would probably bore you to death talking about it. I doubt that, man. I love to talk about Alien. Larry Walsh says Videodrome. James Woods, Deborah Harry. What's not to talk about there? Tony Piramali says Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Great film. Aaron Starrett says Last Shift. Aaron, if you like Last Shift, I would like for you to go check out a little movie called Psych 9. It came out a few years before Last Shift, and it has a very similar vibe. I think if you like one, you'll like the other. Uh, Thomas McNair says When a Stranger Calls. I like that one. I like When a Stranger Calls Back too. I guess you're talking about the original, right? Because I'm not too big on the remake of When a Stranger Calls. Dorothy Lou says The Brood, and we had several other comments, including Your Next, which I thought was a great one. The Scream Marathon from Timothy Speedlove. Emily said Dawn of the Dead. She likes Dawn of the Dead. She knows I like Day of the Dead, so I think she's picking on me a little bit there. Adam Jackson says Brightburn. Lex Teo says Brain Damage. Caleb Wiley says Maniac. There was a lot of comments, guys. Like I said, there was over 115 comments. Bill Cates says Silence of the Lambs. Bill, if I came over to your house to watch Silence of the Lambs, we're going to talk about it for an hour. We'd have to talk about it for the rest of the night. It's one of my favorite films to, break apart. A couple other people said You're Next, and Jason X, Freaks from David Graziano. And yeah, so we had a lot of great comments. A lot of people said The Shining. There was just some interesting ones. John Pilot said American Mary. That's a great pick, I think. Uh, some other people threw out The Thing. The Thing was probably said the most. I'd say Shining was number 2. And then we had John Warback, who said he didn't want me coming over to his house because he didn't know me. I was some guy that he met online, and I understand that, John. And it's nice to see that you can take a joke, or maybe it's nice to see that I can, right? Maybe John's the one that's joking, and I'm not the one that's taking it right. All right, guys, that's all we got for this episode. It's been fun. Tony Kanopka says, "No worries, bro. Hope Regina feels better." Man, her her she won't listen to me like and stay off of it. Like they've got it all wrapped up. They got it like in a thing and in a boot, and they got her on a scooter where she's got to put her knee on it. And guess where she's at work. I told her she's never missed a day of work in the entire time I've known her, like 7 years. She's never missed a day of work. And I try to tell her, take some time off. Just tell them you can't do it. I mean, if they couldn't do it, they wouldn't have a problem with telling you they couldn't do it. And but she is the store manager, and she feels obligated to, especially right now because it's COVID, and they're doing the the vaccine shots. They're giving everybody the vaccine shots every day, so it's really important that it gets done, and she wants to make sure it gets done right. She likes to be there. I don't know if but anyway, yeah. So that's been going on, and we're dealing with it. But yeah, it slipped my mind, and then like when I reminded her about it, she asked me if she could do it Thursday. And I said, yeah, well, sure, we can do it Thursday. See, I could do it myself. It's because I'm an adult, but I have a dog that has an issue, and he has extreme anxiety. Okay, so if Benny is left alone for more than this sounds terrible, and it makes me sound like I'm an idiot, right? Because I'm a spoiled. My dog is spoiled, but he has anxiety. He was abused when he was young, and he's a rescue dog. And after he took to me, from then on out, like anytime I would get further than like if I get outside and he's not with me, he starts to lose it. If Regina's here, he's a little bit easier with it, right? So uh, it's just it's a thing where it's like I don't like to leave him alone for more than like half an hour at a time because he starts to freak out. Like, but I still love him, and I'm not gonna judge him for that because I don't judge people or animals. All right, guys, that's all we've got for this episode. You got that little peek into my personal life there. Yeah, I'm a dog lover, big time dog. I for 5 years I donated my time every weekend to a no kill pit bull shelter just so they could stay open. So they would have people to come in and walk the dogs, just walk the dogs, do whatever needed to be done, clean the stalls, do whatever to keep the place open, keep the place going. Because that was a big deal to me that they had a no, because they were being a no kill pit bull shelter. They would get this was in Missouri. They would get pit bulls from Indiana, Louisiana, Tennessee, wherever they had one in another shelter where they didn't want to put it down. They would send it to us and we would take care of it. And it was privately owned, which was nice because the person who owned it was stinking rich. It was a rich woman who loved dogs, and I guess her husband died and left her a bunch of money, and that's what she decided to do with it. And so, yeah, it was cool. The only problem they had with staying open was getting people to come in and work. You know what I mean? Like come in and volunteer and stuff because they didn't do community service. They didn't want community service people there. They didn't do that kind of thing. So it was all volunteer, right? But yeah, anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is horror and coffee, and I forgot to drink the coffee while we were doing the horror discussion. So I talked for like a long time about today's news stories, and I don't know if there's been anything else recently that I really wanted to talk about. I've seen some movies lately. If you guys want to hear about that, let's take a look. I will talk about some of the movies. I've been wanting to do this because these movies are not like for me something that I want to take time reviewing, like doing a whole review on. But we'll talk about what I've seen. I'll tell you guys what I think about it real quick because it's a lot. I can tell you that. Okay, recently I watched The Power, which was an interesting film about a British nurse who was her first night at a like I won't say it's a mental hospital. It's a ward place like that, for people who are disturbed and have problems. It also kind of seems like an orphanage to some extent. But anyway, yeah, it's her first night working. It's a hospital, and it's her first night working there. And The Power, it's during like when they were doing these massive blackouts in the 70s in England. So it's in London there, and they black out at night at like 10 o'clock, right? And then come back on at 8 o'clock in the morning or something and turn all the power on. But so she's in this hospital and something starts to happen. There's a lot of like backstory in this film. It's really slow, and there's connections between her and characters where you can see that things have happened that they're not telling us before this. They had interactions in their relationship. Uh, and so one thing leads to the next. This place is creepy, and there's like a entity there that's looking for revenge, and it takes possession of this nurse, and she starts flipping out on the other people that are still there. I thought it was decent. I didn't think it was great, and I kept waiting for it to like climb over that hump and get really great, but it never did. And so yeah, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't great. Another film we just recently watched the other night, Jacob's Wife, with Larry Fessenden and Barbara Crampton. I thought it was a little disappointing. Other than look, the production value is decent. It looks like a Larry Fessenden film, and it's right on par with that. But the vampire story, it's a vampire story, by the way, and I'm not giving anything away by telling you that because you'd have to be you know kind of dumb not to figure that out really quick in this one. The story, it's just a vampire story about an older couple, and it's nothing you haven't seen before. I don't want to give away everything that happens in case you do find it seriously interesting, but I will say that the one of them becomes a vampire and the other one is trying to help them out with that situation. And there's some comedy there with like cleaning up after a vampire, what that's like. And there are some like off-key moments in the movie that work where things kind of don't happen the way that you think they're going to, or people walk into situations where they're like, "What the hell?" That's not usually something that happens in a movie. There was some decent gore in it, but it goes from being decent gore to being like VFW gore, where it's just cheesy and over the top, and they want you to accept it as part of the movie, which I don't have a problem with. I like that kind of gore sometimes. You just accept it's a practical effect, it's not real, and you go with it. Uh, but I don't know. There's just something lacking in this movie, and also like the vampire design I didn't like. Regina actually liked the vampire design. I didn't like it. It was like a parody of Nosferatu to me. They were making fun of Nosferatu in a characterization. I didn't like it that much, but whatever. So that one I would probably give, for me it was like 5 out of, it was, watch it if you like Barbara Crampton, if you like Larry Fessenden, and if you like vampire films, give it a chance. I mean, I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. I didn't love it. So another one I watched recently was called Rose, and this one was interesting. I kind of like this story better than the one we just talked about, even though they are very similar now that I think about it. And Rose is a story about a guy who lives in the woods with his wife, and he is keeping her basically away from other people because Rose turns into a vampire creature. It doesn't actually say vampire in the movie, but whatever. And so he's trying to keep her away from people, but then this backfires when one of his bear traps catches a teenage girl and she's pregnant and she doesn't want to go home. And Rose doesn't have a lot to live for at this point because she's this creature and she wants to help the girl and she wants him to help the girl. She thinks it will enrich his life to help her. And of course, things go wrong or they go badly. When you introduce a third person into this two-person relationship where one person is a creature, a bloodthirsty creature. Yeah. So it's not that great. Uh, or the ending, the way it turns out is not that great. The film I actually liked a lot. I'm not going to say it's a top 10 film for this year. Hopefully it won't be, but it's decent. It's definitely worth a watch. That one's called Rose, and I think some people will probably like it even more than what I did. We watched The Oak Room, which was terrible. Dollface, which was terrible. What else did we watch that was new? Okay. The Unholy, which I did a full review on. I tried to watch Slasherette Party. No, I couldn't. It was too bad. The Resort, which was kind of decent. It was kind of weird. Like it was a different take on a haunted movie because it's on an island and it's an abandoned island where nobody's supposed to go for some reason or another. I thought it was going to end up being like a Chernobyl Diaries type deal, but it wasn't. It was decent, and I wouldn't recommend it exactly, but it wasn't the worst thing I've seen ever. Honeydew. This one was way overhyped. I don't know, like people were talking about this one, and I was anxious to see it, and it is just terrible. It's like eating a cracker with no salt on it. That's what this movie is like, and it goes on and on, setting itself up, and you think like, okay, this is going to come to a boil. There's going to be like a huge, uh, torturous hills have eyes type of scene at the end of this. It totally fails on every level, in my opinion. And so I don't know why like people. Is it different? Is it an original? Yeah, it's got an original concept to the story, and you could tell that the director is he's very full, or she, whoever directed it, very full of themselves. They really think they have, their own style, and that seems to be more about what the film is about, is them putting forth their own style of filmmaking than trying to make any kind of a logical narrative that you want to watch for a period of time. I mean, I won't say it was illogical. It's boring. Okay, it's boring. And when it gets to the end, it just doesn't pay. I wanted it to pay off. I wanted it to be like, hey, man, I watched this movie that was so batshit crazy for the first 45 minutes. I almost turned it off. And then all of a sudden it went into overdrive. But do you think that happened? No, not this time. Violation. I talked about that film. It's a rape revenge film. I did a full review on that on the channel here. And so, yeah, that's some of the ones I've watched recently that I hadn't mentioned. Come True was another one about a girl who goes to a sleep what do they call it, sleep tank, sleep study, and that one was kind of interesting. The production value was good, but I couldn't stick with the story, man. It seemed a little out. I mean, not out there, but just I didn't like it. I don't know. And this teenager is like roaming around everywhere. It's funny. I mean, not funny, but just odd, I thought, and I wasn't a big fan of that one. The Block Island Sound. That one was interesting too. The sound is coming from out of the ocean and it's making people crazy on this island. And so this is something I've researched recently or in the past and had some knowledge of, that sound is actually one of the most dangerous things in the world. Like the certain frequency of sound can do things to human beings that nobody has any idea about. And it's something that you wouldn't like. It would make your hand a sound could make your body shake so slightly that, consciously you wouldn't realize it, but it's happening constantly. And then you get worn down and you get fatigued and you start to break down psychologically and you start to become suicidal or depressed or homicidal. And this is true. These things happen. Uh, and so there are one of the things, there are far more things in nature to be afraid of than in, make believe and things like that. I also watched Slacks. I thought that was pretty fun about the genes that eat people. They definitely can't take that seriously. And The Stylist, which had an opportunity to be a great film, it apparently was a short film. At one point, they decided to turn it into a feature length film. Should have left it a short film because it starts off great and it just kind of goes nowhere. The end is so predictable. You could see it coming a mile away. There were other directions it could have went that would have been like, I was trying to think while we're watching this, me and Regina, and we're like, where is this going? We know where it's going. Is there any possible way they could make a left turn here and do something different? They could have. They chose not to. And the movie, in my opinion, The Stylist is a great title for it because it's very over stylized. It is completely over stylized. There's long periods of time in the movie where nothing happened. There's scenes that are wasted. Like, I don't know how to explain it better than that. It would have served itself better as a short film, and then maybe like this filmmaker goes on and does something else. But yeah, so that's just some of the stuff I've seen recently. I could go back further than that, like Willy's Wonderland and Sun and other stuff. But yeah, I think I've talked about those before. And so I'll leave it at that. And that way we're close to an hour. We talked about a bunch of horror films. We talked about a bunch of the comments in the group. We talked about a bunch of news stories. So if you guys missed anything, head back to the beginning and start from scratch. Yeah, we had some fun conversation. And I was just looking to see the live comments, just see if there was anything else, and there's not. So we're gonna a good place to stop, and we will talk to you guys as always the next time we get something. Well, one movie just before we go, I was gonna tell you, yeah, tomorrow we're doing another 5 free movies. Uh, I've got that put together already. Actually, I'm just not gonna put it out till tomorrow. And then Thursday we're doing an exclusive show. We're gonna be taping with so far that I know of. We're gonna be taping with Alex Pearson and Emily Dunlap from Gag Me with a Knife. And we're going to be talking about our favorite uh, underrated killers from slasher movies. So that should be a fun. These guys know everything about slasher movies. I'm considering like trying to bring some backup with me. I've got a few names in mind of people I might bring with me for that show to talk about underrated. We're going to do our top ones, so everybody's list should be a little bit different. I hope so. Just to throw something out there, one of mine is definitely probably going to be Klaus Kinski from Creep or not Creep Show from Crawl Space. That's going to be one of mine, and yeah. So I'm really interested to hear what everybody says. I might go with Doctor Giggles. I'm a big Doctor Giggles fan. I shouldn't be giving all mine away right now though, because those guys are notorious for stealing ideas. All right, guys. We will talk to you the next time we got something worth talking about. Bye.